Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into some really fascinating stuff.
Okay.
Vanessa Van Edwards and all her work on body language,
Right.
charisma, all these subtle things that can really make a difference, in how our interactions go.
Absolutely.
And we're lucky enough to have a great interview with Van Edwards herself for this one. So we're going to be going deeper than the surface level this time.
Yeah.
Think of it like we're unlocking the hidden language of social success.
I like that.
We're going to get into actionable tips and maybe even some surprising facts that could totally change the way you navigate everything, from job interviews to first dates.
That's a big range.
It is.
It's amazing, how much we communicate without even realizing it. Van Edwards really gets into this, starting with this idea of warmth and competence and how important they are in making a charismatic impression.
Okay.
And she points to this study by Dr. Susan Fisk.
Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I am. It found that warmth and competence actually make up a whopping 82%.
82% of our first impressions of other people.
Wow. That's huge.
It's massive.
It really underscores just how important it is to get that balance right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just about appearing competent. Too much competence without warmth can actually work against you, making you seem suspicious or untrustworthy.
That's interesting because you think competence is a good thing.
Right. We all want to be competent, but if you don't have that warmth, it can be a problem.
Yeah.
Think about it. We're naturally drawn to people who seem both capable and approachable.
That makes total sense. When I think about it, there's that entrepreneur, Jamie Siminoff from Shark Tank. He had this brilliant idea, a billion-dollar concept.
Yeah.
But he didn't really connect with the sharks on a personal level.
I see what you mean. He might have had the competence, but he was missing that warmth.
Yeah.
And it ultimately cost him a deal. So the question is, how do we actually project these qualities in a way that's authentic and effective?
Van Edwards breaks it down into 5 power cues for conveying competence.
Okay, let's hear them.
All right, so the first one is the steeple.
The steeple.
Yeah, that hand gesture.
Okay.
Where you bring your fingertips together.
Yeah.
Van Edwards actually uses this on the cover of her book.
I've seen that. But I've always wondered, isn't it a bit cliche?
Yeah.
Could it backfire?
Yeah.
Can it make you seem arrogant?
Yeah, it definitely could, if it's not genuine. The key here is to use it subtly. In moments where you're truly feeling confident and in control, it's about aligning your body language with your inner state.
I see.
For example,
Okay.
imagine you're about to give a presentation.
Okay.
Taking a moment to steeple your hands can actually help you channel those feelings of confidence
Yeah.
and authority.
Okay, so it's more about tapping into an existing feeling than forcing it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. What's the next power cue?
All right, so the next one is body angle.
Body angle.
Something as simple as angling your body slightly towards someone during a conversation can have a huge impact on how you're perceived.
Okay, but isn't that something people do naturally if they're interested in what someone's saying?
You're right. It often happens subconsciously, but consciously using it can actually amplify that engagement. It's like you're saying, I'm giving you my full attention. And when you combine it with other cues like eye contact and nodding, it creates this really powerful impression of attentiveness.
I see. So it's about being deliberate
Yeah.
with these subtle signals.
Yes.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. What about eye contact?
Yes. Van Edwards talks a lot about that. Specifically, eye contact at the end of your sentences.
I've never thought about that.
When you make eye contact as you finish a sentence, it conveys focus, intensity, makes you appear more powerful and in control.
Like with the steeple, it seems like something that you have to use strategically.
We do. Constant, unwavering eye contact can be a little intimidating.
Yeah. So it's about finding that right balance.
Exactly.
So it's not about staring someone down.
No.
Okay, that's reassuring. Okay, what's next?
The 4th power cue is the lower lid flex.
Lower lid flex. What is that?
So this one's a bit subtle. It's when you slightly tighten your lower eyelids, almost as if you're focusing intensely on something.
Yeah.
In the distance. Van Edwards says it demonstrates deep focus. It can even be used to gauge skepticism or confusion.
Oh, so if I'm talking to someone and I see them doing that, it might mean they're not buying what I'm selling.
It could be.
Or
They could be trying to process some complex information. It's a really interesting cue to watch out for, both in yourself and in others.
I'm adding that one to my mental toolbox. What's the 5th power cue?
The 5th and final one is downward inflection.
Downward inflection.
This was all about how you end your sentences.
Okay.
Using a downward inflection makes you sound more confident and believable.
So it's the opposite of that upspeak thing, where everything sounds like a question.
Exactly. Think about it. When someone ends their sentences on an upswing, it can make them sound unsure or hesitant. Downward inflection conveys certainty and authority.
That's interesting, because she points out that liars often use that question inflection.
They do.
Really? It's like they're subconsciously seeking validation for their lie. Like they're asking, do you believe me? Without actually saying the words.
It's true.
And our brains are picking up on these subtle cues, even if we're not consciously aware of it. It influences how we perceive trustworthiness.
Yeah.
Wow, I had no idea how much is going on beneath the surface of our everyday conversations.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Okay, so we've talked about projecting competence. What about warmth?
That's a good one.
How do we come across as likable and approachable, especially if we're prone to being perceived as a little intimidating?
Especially in a first impression.
Right.
That's a great question. And it's something Van Edwards addresses directly. She outlines 5 warmth cues that are really effective.
I'm ready.
The first one is what she calls the triple nod.
Triple nod. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's simple but powerful. You slowly nod your head 3 times while someone is speaking, almost as if to say, tell me more.
Oh, interesting. I can see how that would encourage someone to open up more. Does it actually work?
There's actually research that shows that the triple nod can encourage people to speak up to 67% longer.
Wow. That's amazing.
It is.
It makes people feel heard and validated.
Yeah. Which in turn makes them want to share more.
I'm definitely going to try that one.
Let me know how it goes.
I will.
All right, what's next?
Okay, what's the next warmth cue?
So we all do this naturally when we're trying to listen carefully, as if we're tilting our ear to catch every word. But tilting your head during a conversation can actually make you seem more warm and empathetic.
It shows you're truly paying attention.
Exactly.
And it can even soften the blow if you're delivering bad news.
It's true. It can make even difficult conversations feel more supportive and understanding.
Makes sense.
All right, what else?
Okay, what else?
Of course, a genuine smile.
An authentic smile.
A real smile is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But forcing it can backfire.
Right.
It can actually make you seem less trustworthy.
So it's all about being genuine.
Yeah.
What about leaning in? I've heard that that's a good way to show interest, but I could also see how it could be a little much.
Yeah.
Especially if you do it too aggressively.
You're right. There's a fine line there. Leaning in slightly can signal interest, build rapport.
Yeah.
But overdoing it can come off as overly eager or even creepy.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where you're showing interest without invading someone's space.
So reading the room and responding accordingly.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, so what's the last warmth cue?
All right, so the last one is the nonverbal bridge.
The nonverbal bridge.
It's a way of kind of closing that physical distance between you and someone else.
Okay.
Using gestures.
Yeah.
Or light touches. It could be something as simple as briefly touching someone's arm as you make a point. Or reaching at your hand like you're about to hand them something.
I can see how that would create a sense of connection and warmth.
It does.
It's like you're subtly saying, I'm with you.
That's it. And it's something that we see a lot in close relationships. Think about how couples will often touch each other's arms or backs as they're talking. It's a nonverbal way of reinforcing their bond.
It's like a subconscious way of saying, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
This is fascinating stuff.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered the nonverbal cues for both competence and warmth. What about verbal cues?
Oh, this is a good one. Verbal cues are just as important as nonverbal cues in shaping how we're perceived and how we connect with others. So let's dive into some of Van Edwards' most effective strategies for using language to build rapport and create a positive impression. Have you ever noticed how good it feels when someone remembers a small detail about you?
Oh, absolutely. Like when someone says, hey, how was that trip you were planning?
Yes. It makes you feel like they were really listening and that they care.
And that they remember.
Exactly. Van Edwards highlights
one
magic phrase for likability. And it's, I was just thinking of you.
I love that. It's so simple, but so effective. I'm definitely adding that to my repertoire.
Me too. It just makes people feel valued and appreciated.
Yeah.
It shows that you've been thinking about them
Yeah.
even when they weren't around.
It's all about making people feel seen and remembered.
Yes. And this ties into another concept Van Edwards talks about, the signal amplification bias.
Signal amplification bias.
This is the tendency to assume that our feelings and intentions are obvious to others.
Okay.
In reality, we often underestimate the need to explicitly express our positive feelings.
So even if we're thinking positive thoughts,
Yeah.
they might not know unless we say something.
Right. Don't leave those positive feelings unspoken.
That's a good reminder to not leave things unsaid.
Absolutely. Make an effort to vocalize.
Yeah.
Your appreciation, your affection, your support, those words
Yeah.
can make a world of difference.
I like that. Okay. So we're making people feel good
Yeah.
by expressing those positive feelings. What else can we do to strengthen connections?
Well, Edwards is really big on the power of asking the right questions.
I love a good question.
Me too. Asking thoughtful questions shows genuine interest,
Yeah.
and it helps you uncover shared interests as values.
Yeah.
It's like a shortcut
Yeah.
to building rapport and intimacy.
It is.
And she actually suggests 3 questions
2 questions. Okay, I'm ready.
that are incredibly effective.
Where are they?
The first one is, are you working on anything exciting recently?
I like that because it goes beyond just like the typical,
Yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah.
And it invites people to share their passions and what they're currently excited about.
Exactly. It gives you a glimpse into their world,
Yeah.
their motivations, their creative energy.
And it opens the door for a much more engaging conversation.
It does. The second question,
What is the second question?
what's your biggest goal right now?
Ooh, that's a good one. It gets right to the heart of what drives someone. Shows that you're interested in their aspirations
Yeah.
and their long-term vision.
Yes. And it can lead to some really fascinating conversations. I bet. And the third question.
Right, and the third question is a bit more introspective.
Okay.
What book, movie, or TV character is most like you and why?
That's a fun one because it encourages self-reflection and can reveal a lot about someone's self-perception and values.
Yeah.
I love how he uses pop culture
Yeah.
as a springboard for deeper conversation.
It does. Van Edwards actually shares an anecdote about how this question helped her understand a friend's self-narrative in a completely new light.
Oh, why?
And it led to a much deeper connection and understanding.
It's almost like you're getting a sneak peek into their inner world, their aspirations,
Yeah.
their role models. I love how these questions can be used in both personal and professional settings.
Absolutely.
You could ask a colleague,
Yeah.
a potential client, even someone you just met at a networking event.
It's a great way to break the ice.
Yeah. It's about being curious about people, asking deeper questions,
Yeah.
and creating space for genuine connection.
Yeah. Now, this next part is really interesting.
Van Edwards talks about embracing imperfection and vulnerability
Yeah.
as a way to build authentic connections.
I've heard a bit about this. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but I'm curious to hear more.
It does, right? It seems like we need to project this image of perfection to be likable and successful.
Right.
But in reality, showing our flaws can actually make us more relatable.
So it's about being human,
Yeah.
letting people see our imperfection.
Yes. There's this study by Dr. Richard Wiseman where a model selling blenders actually sold more after she spilled a smoothie.
Wait, seriously, spilling a smoothie actually helped her sell more blenders.
It sounds crazy, but it's true. It's because perfection can be intimidating.
I see.
It creates distance
Right.
when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to show our imperfections.
Yeah.
It makes us more approachable and human.
It's like we're saying, hey, I'm not perfect, and that's okay.
Exactly.
It takes the pressure off.
Van Edwards actually connects this to her own experience,
Yeah.
overcoming the fear of failure. To write her successful book, Captivate, she realized that. Embracing her imperfections,
Yeah.
being vulnerable with her readers was key to the book's success.
Yeah.
Because it allowed people to connect with her on a deeper level.
Makes her seem more authentic,
Yeah.
more relatable.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. So before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear some of those additional insights from the interview.
Oh, there's so many.
You know, you've got some good ones.
But one that really stuck with me
Yeah.
was the impact of proximity on performance.
Proximity on performance.
And it turns out being near high performers can actually boost your output.
Really? So I sit next to the superstar in the office. I'll magically become
Yeah.
more productive.
Not magically, but there's research to back this up. A study spanning 58,000 working hours across 11 companies
Wow.
found that. Sitting within 25 feet
Ah.
of a high performer boosted individual performance by 15%.
Okay.
But on the flip side, sitting near a low performer actually decreased performance by 30%.
That's a pretty significant impact. It's almost like their energy and work ethic are contagious.
It is contagious. We are social creatures.
Yeah.
And our environment has a profound impact on our own behavior and performance.
Okay, so if you're looking to boost your productivity, surround yourself with people who inspire you and challenge you to do your best.
I love that.
That's great advice.
What else?
Okay, what else did Van Edwards talk about?
She also touched on our primal ability to detect fear in other people's sweat.
We can smell fear.
We can literally smell fear.
Wait, what? We can smell fear. I've never heard of that.
It's incredibly, we have this innate ability to pick up on these subtle chemical signals
Right.
that other people are giving off. It highlights the contagious nature of emotions. Think about how you can feel the tension in a room when someone is anxious or afraid.
That makes total sense. It's like our bodies are picking up on those signals, even if we're not consciously aware of it. Now I'm starting to feel a little paranoid. Like, what if people can smell my fear when I'm giving a presentation?
Don't worry too much about that. I think the key takeaway here is just to be mindful of the energy you're bringing to your interactions.
Okay. Expert. Okay. I'm ready to dive back into the fascinating world of Vanessa Van Edwards. Last time we were talking about projecting warmth and competence and those subtle cues that can make such a big difference in our interactions. But there's a whole other side to this, right? Like, what about decoding the signals other people are sending?
That's a good point. Van Edwards gets into the art of reading people. One of the most common questions people have is, can you really spot a liar?
I know.
It seems almost like a superpower.
Like something out of a spy movie.
Right.
But is it actually possible?
So Van Edwards says that the average person can only detect a lie with about 54% accuracy.
54%.
Which is basically like flipping a coin.
So we're not as good at it as we think we are?
No, we're not.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to be aware of those common cues that are associated with deception, but also to avoid jumping to conclusions.
Okay.
So it's about noticing those subtle signals, but also considering the context.
Yeah.
And giving people the benefit of the doubt.
That's good advice. Okay, so let's get into it. What are some of the red flags that Van Edwards has identified?
All right, so remember how we talked about downward inflection at the end of sentences, conveying confidence?
Yeah.
Well, the opposite is also true.
Okay.
Liars often use what Van Edwards calls question inflection.
Question inflection.
That upward lilt at the end of a sentence. That can make you sound unsure or hesitant.
So like they're saying, I didn't eat the last cookie. But it sounds more like, I didn't eat the last cookie.
Did I?
Yeah.
It's that subconscious way of seeking validation, like gauging the other person's reaction to see if they're buying it.
Like T voices. Their voices betraying their words.
Yes.
What other vocal cues should we be paying attention to?
So a sudden drop in volume can be a telltale sign. When we're nervous or anxious, we tend to lose volume and breath support. So if someone is speaking confidently and then suddenly drops to a whisper when they're discussing a particular topic, that could be a red flag.
It's like their body is trying to hide something, even if their words are saying something else.
That's a good way to put it.
What about nonverbal cues?
One of the most important things to look for is incongruence.
Incongruent.
This is where someone's verbal cues don't match their nonverbal cues.
So they're saying one thing, but their body language is saying something else.
Right, like when they say yes.
Yeah.
But they shake their head no.
Yeah.
Or they're telling you how excited they are. But their face and tone are totally flat.
Yeah, those mixed signals can be confusing, but it sounds like they can also be
they can
really
often indicate some kind of internal conflict.
Yeah.
Or that someone is trying to mask their true feelings. And Edwards even talks about it. It's then called the sniff.
The sniff, like when you just sniffle in air through your nose?
Yeah.
That can mean something.
So we tend to activate our nasal cavities when we're disgusted by something.
Yeah.
It's an evolutionary response to minimize exposure to unpleasant odors. And even though we're not dealing with actual smells, when it comes to lying, that same physiological response can occur.
It's subconscious expression of distaste.
Exactly.
That's amazing how our bodies can betray our true feelings, even in those seemingly insignificant ways.
It is. So it's crucial to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Those nonverbal cues.
Yeah.
Because they often reveal more than words ever could.
I agree. Okay, so we're getting better at reading people, maybe even spotting a few lies. But what about understanding our own relationships?
Oh, that's a good one.
Van Edwards talks about something called ambivalent relationships, and that really intrigued me.
It's an interesting concept. These are those relationships where you're constantly unsure about the other person's feelings and intentions.
Okay.
And they can actually be more draining than toxic relationships.
I can see that. Because with a toxic relationship, you at least know where you stand. But with an ambivalent relationship, you're always second-guessing yourself, wondering if they really care.
Right. That constant uncertainty can be exhausting.
And Van Edwards cites the study of police officers that found that those with the most ambivalent relationships reported higher levels of unhappiness, stress, and burnout than those with toxic relationships.
Isn't that interesting? That is surprising.
You would think that toxic relationships would be the most damaging.
Right.
But it's that constant ambiguity that really takes a toll on our well-being.
So how do we deal with these ambivalent relationships? Do we just cut them off?
So Van Edwards suggests the strategy she calls move them up or move them out.
We'll move them up or move them out.
I like that. If you're constantly feeling unsure about someone, it's time to either invest in deepening that relationship or creating some distance.
So don't let those relationships linger in that gray area.
Right.
It's about making a conscious choice to either strengthen the bond or let it go. It's not always easy, though, is it?
It can be really hard because sometimes it's easier to just stay in that limbo, even if it's not really serving you.
You're right. It is hard. But it's ultimately about prioritizing your own emotional well-being and surrounding yourself with people who bring you energy and joy, not uncertainty and stress.
That's good advice. I think that's something a lot of us could benefit from hearing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have to ask. Van Edwards has some great advice for making friends as adults, right?
Yes.
I know that's something a lot of people struggle with.
It's hard. It can be really hard. And it might sound a little counterintuitive, but she actually suggests approaching friendship, like dating.
What, dating your friends? That actually sounds kind of fun.
I think so, too. It's about being proactive. So instead of just hoping to bump into someone who magically becomes your new best friend, think about the qualities you value in a friend, the activities you enjoy, and then actively seek out people who share those passions.
So like join a book club, take a cooking class, volunteer for a cause you care about.
Exactly. Those are great examples. And just like dating, take your potential friends on friendship dates.
Friendship dates. I like that.
Get coffee, try a new restaurant, go for a hike, spend time together, get to know each other, and see if there's a spark.
I love that because it takes the pressure off.
It does. You're not going in with the expectation that this person has to be your new best friend.
Right.
You're just exploring a potential connection. And if it doesn't work out, that's okay.
There are plenty of other fish in the sea.
Exactly. Van Edwards even talks about taking potential friends to this particular vegan restaurant in Austin.
Right. Why? What's so special about this vegan restaurant?
It has a very specific, non-modifiable menu. And she says it's a great way to observe how people react to unexpected situations. It's like a little personality test. Do they go with the flow? Are they flexible? Do they make the best of it? Or do they get all stressed out and complain? It's a low-stakes way to get a glimpse into someone's personality and see if you're compatible.
I'm definitely going to have to try that.
Let me know how it goes.
Okay.
But what about people who are really struggling to make friends? Like they just don't connect with anyone.
Right.
What advice does Van Edwards have for them? She suggests
focusing on activities and interests. Find something you genuinely enjoy doing and join a group or a class related to that.
So surround yourself with people who share your passion.
Exactly.
You automatically have something to talk about. And it takes the pressure off of trying to force a connection.
It does. And once you're in that environment, use those powerful questions we talked about earlier. Are you working on anything exciting? What's your biggest goal right now? Those questions can spark conversations and help build rapport.
They're great for breaking the ice. And finding that common ground.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're making friends. We're deciphering those nonverbal cues. What else is there? So this next topic is something we touched on a little bit earlier, but it's worth exploring further.
Okay.
The impact of technology on our interpersonal skills. Van Edwards is really concerned about how something as seemingly innocuous as AirPods can actually create a barrier to connection.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I've been thinking a lot about my AirPod usage lately. It's so easy to just pop them in and tune out the world. But I'm realizing that I'm missing out on those spontaneous interactions that can lead to meaningful connections.
You're right.
And that's what Van Edwards is worried about. We're missing those micro moments, those chance encounters that could blossom into friendships, collaborations, even romantic relationships.
It's like we're sending this message to the world, don't talk to me.
Right. We're creating this invisible wall between ourselves and this.
As we become isolated, more plugged into our devices, we risk losing those valuable opportunities.
For connection, it's a good reminder to be more present, to engage with the world around us, and be open to those serendipitous encounters that can enrich our lives.
I love that.
In unexpected ways.
Okay, now this next story
Yeah.
might surprise you.
All right.
Van Edwards talks about President Franklin D. Roosevelt.
FDR.
Yes, and how he navigated the world of public speaking, even though he was quite introverted.
I love FDR. He was such a powerful leader, but I had no idea he was introverted. It just goes to show that you don't have to be this charismatic extrovert to be successful.
You don't. So during the 1944 Democratic National Convention, he knew that he wouldn't win people over with soaring rhetoric and charisma. So he took a different approach.
What did he do?
He actually rented the only air-conditioned room in the entire convention center and invited delegates to meet with him one-on-one.
Wow, that's brilliant. He turned a potential weakness into a strength.
He did. In these smaller, more intimate settings, he could connect with people on a personal level, listen to their concerns, and win them over with sincerity and logic.
So he ended up winning the nomination without having to deliver a single grand speech.
That's amazing. I think the takeaway here is that we don't have to conform to some preconceived notion of what a good speaker looks like. We can leverage our own unique strengths and find ways to connect authentically.
It's about playing to your strengths and finding what works for you, even if it's unconventional.
Exactly.
And Van Edwards encourages us to think beyond those traditional in-person interactions as well.
Social strengths can manifest in many ways, whether it's through .writing, .online communities, or even creating video content. It's about finding your voice and using it in a way that feels genuine and fulfilling.
I think that's really empowering. We can choose how we want to express ourselves and connect with the world.
I love that. Now, this next piece of advice from Van Edwards really resonated with me. It's about turning and facing your pain.
What does that mean?
It's about acknowledging those difficult experiences that have shaped us and using them as fuel for growth.
So instead of trying to bury those painful memories, we should confront them head on.
Yes.
That sounds really challenging.
It can be. Van Edwards actually shares a very personal story about her own experience with failure.
Okay.
She had this traditionally published book that completely flopped. Received terrible reviews. And she was told she'd never write another book again.
Wow. That's heartbreaking.
It is,
I can't imagine how devastating that must have been. But she didn't give up, did she?
She didn't. She actually used that experience as fuel to reinvent herself and create the successful career she has today.
That's inspiring. It shows that even the most successful people have faced setbacks and challenges. And it's how they respond to those experiences that really defines them.
Absolutely.
And that's the message Van Edwards is trying to convey. It's about embracing those imperfections, owning our stories, and using them as fuel for growth and creativity.
That's a good way to put it.
I think that's a message we all need to hear. Okay, so we've talked a lot about building genuine connections, but what about protecting ourselves?
That's an important point from people who might not be so genuine. You know, those who might be trying to manipulate us or take advantage of our trust.
That's a really good point. And that's where understanding body language and decoding those subtle cues can be so valuable.
It is.
Van Edwards provides a framework for recognizing potential red flags and protecting yourself from those who might not have your best interests at heart.
Right.
It's about learning to trust our gut Pay attention to those red flags and be discerning about who we allow into our inner circles.
It's not about being paranoid, but it's about being aware.
Okay.
So before we wrap up part 2, I want to ask you about something Van Edwards calls peacocking.
Peacocking. Sounds a little flamboyant. What is that exactly?
So it's a term that comes from pickup artist.
Okay.
And it refers to using flashy displays or exaggerated behaviors to attract attention.
So it's all about trying to impress people, stand out from the crowd.
Exactly.
And often it's used in a romantic context, but it can apply to other areas of life.
It can, like trying to impress a potential employer or trying to gain social status.
But I'm sensing that Van Edwards isn't exactly endorsing this approach.
Right, yeah.
It sounds.
A bit contrived.
She actually cautions against it.
Okay.
She believes that genuine connection comes from authenticity, not from trying to impress or manipulate.
It's about being your best self, not some flashy version of yourself that you think other people will like.
Exactly. She tells this funny story about a group of friends pursuing this woman at a bar. Some of them were engaging in full-on peacocking mode.
Oh, I can just picture it. It's painful to even think about.
Like leaning in too close, trying way too hard to impress. And you know who ended up connecting with this woman? The friend who was relaxed and genuine and didn't try to force anything. He was just being himself.
It's a good reminder that authenticity is attractive.
It is. Trying too hard often backfires. Okay. Genuine connection comes from a place of self-assurance and respect, not from trying to play games or manipulate. I like that. And that's a great segue into Van Edwards' advice on personal branding. She emphasizes the importance of aligning your online presence with your true self. So your social media profiles, your website, all of that should reflect who you really are, not some idealized version of yourself.
Right.
It's about showcasing your genuine strengths, passions, and values. She tells the story of a client who was struggling to attract the right kind of men on dating apps.
Oh, she was using photos
what was she doing wrong?
That portrayed her as this party girl, when in reality...
Expert speaker. All right, so we're back and ready to tackle those tricky conversations that we all dread, giving feedback, setting boundaries, dealing with difficult people.
It's the hard stuff.
These are the situations where having those social dynamic skills that we've been talking about can really make a difference.
You're absolutely right. These are the moments that can really test our social intelligence. And Van Edwards offers some great advice for navigating these conversations with grace and confidence.
Yeah.
Let's start with feedback.
Okay.
It's something we all have to give and receive at some point.
Yeah.
But it can be.
Yeah.
Fraught with tension.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
I personally struggle with giving feedback. I hate to hurt anyone's feelings, so I tend to just avoid it altogether.
I get it. It's a common struggle.
But I'm realizing that's not really helpful in the long run.
Van Edwards emphasizes framing feedback in a way that feels supportive and constructive.
Okay.
Rather than critical or judgmental.
So it's about focusing on specific behaviors and their impact, not attacking someone's character or making sweeping generalizations.
Exactly. So instead of saying, you're always late, you might say, when you're late to meetings, it makes it difficult for us to stay on track and respect everyone's time.
I see. So that's much better. It feels less accusatory and more focused on the issue at hand.
Right. Van Edwards suggests using what's called the sandwich method.
The sandwich method.
You start with a positive observation. Then you deliver the constructive feedback. And then you end with another positive note.
I like that. It's like those delicious little tea sandwiches where the bread helps to balance out the savory fillings. Makes the feedback a little easier to swallow.
Now, on the receiving end of feedback, Van Edwards encourages us to listen actively, avoid getting defensive, and ask clarifying questions. It's about approaching feedback as an opportunity for growth rather than a personal attack.
It can be tough to separate our ego from the feedback, but ultimately it's about remembering that the person giving the feedback is probably trying to help us improve. And receiving feedback well is a skill that can really set you apart.
It does.
Shows that you're open to learning and growing.
I agree.
Okay, so we've tackled feedback. What about setting boundaries?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's something I really struggle with.
That's so common.
I hate saying no to people.
Especially for women.
I feel like I have to say yes to everything and everyone.
But setting clear boundaries is crucial for protecting our time, our energy, and our emotional well-being.
That's true. So how do we actually do that? I always feel so awkward saying no.
Van Edwards suggests some really helpful phrases.
Well, okay.
I appreciate you asking, but I'm not able to take that on right now. Or, I'm happy to help, but I have a hard stop at 5 p.m.
Those are great. They're clear, direct, and respectful without being overly apologetic or defensive.
And what happens if someone...
What if someone
keeps pushing? What if they try to guilt trip me into saying yes?
If someone continues to push your boundaries, you simply repeat your boundary statement calmly and firmly.
So stand your ground.
Yes.
And recognize that you have the right to say no.
It's about honoring your own needs and recognizing that you can't please everyone all the time. And sometimes that means saying no, even if it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. And speaking of uncomfortable, let's talk about those people who just seem to
I know where you're going with that.
Drain our energy, those energy vampires who leave us feeling exhausted and depleted.
Ugh, we all know those people. But what can we actually do about them?
Well, Van Edwards suggests a technique she calls labeling. It involves acknowledging the other person's behavior and its impact on you without judgment or blame. It's about bringing awareness to the situation in a neutral way.
So if someone is constantly interrupting me, I might say, I notice you've interrupted me a few times. I'm having trouble finishing my thought.
That's a perfect example. By labeling the behavior, you're bringing it to their attention in a non-confrontational way.
Right.
They may not even realize they're doing it.
It's like holding up a mirror and saying, hey, look what you're doing, but in a kind of way.
In a nice way.
And if labeling doesn't work, then you set boundaries and limit your exposure, protect your precious energy, surround yourself with people who uplift and inspire you, not those who drain you dry.
That's such important advice. And this brings us back to one of Van Edwards' most powerful messages, embracing imperfection.
Embracing imperfection.
She encourages us to let go of the pursuit of perfection, which can be so exhausting.
I know.
And to embrace our flaws, our quirks, our vulnerability.
It's recognizing that perfection is an illusion.
It is.
And our imperfections are what make us unique and relatable. She reminds us that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness.
That's right.
It allows us to connect with others on a deeper level and to build more authentic relationships.
It's about letting go of the need to present this perfect facade to the world and allowing our true selves to shine through.
I love that.
Mastering the art of social dynamics is an ongoing journey.
It is. It's about, we're all scientists in our own social laboratories, constantly experimenting.
And gathering data.
And remember to approach every interaction with authenticity and a genuine desire to connect.
So keep diving deep, keep experimenting, and keep those connections flourishing.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the work of Vanessa Van Edwards. I've learned so much.
Me too.
It's amazing how much there is to discover about this subtle art of human connection. It's like we've unlocked a secret code, and now we have the tools to create more meaningful and fulfilling relationships.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this deep dive. We've got a lot more to explore. So stay tuned for our next episode.
Until then, keep those connections strong.